might feel already that you really only want to talk about your business, about, you know, what you sell and your services and how they benefit people. And that is totally fine. And you will manage to get PR with that. But sometimes it is nice to reveal a little bit more about you. And you might be hesitant to talk about you, and that is fine. But I'm going to be showing you here today, you know, like easier ways to think about this and to not be nervous about it. So you might not be sure how to connect the business side of your story to a more personal side. And I'm also going to look at that. And then, of course, there's always the question of, well, how much is too much? How much, you know, of me do I want to give? How much are people going to be interested in? And these are things, you know, that you can consider, you know, as you go down this route. Okay, so now let me see. Any issues with anything? No, I'm going to pop in and out because I need to go to kind of flick between two windows, but I'll be keeping an eye on the live just to make sure it's going okay. So I know a lot of people call this personal branding, and I like to call it personality marketing because it's about your personality and, you know, elements of your personality that you want to share with the media. So it's about you and relating you to your audience. Some people look at this as like, you know, packaging you and packaging you in a way that can, you know, sell more of you. But for me, I actually don't like that word package, and to package somebody, you know, in order to get media publicity. For me, this is about personal stories that build your identity with the media and build your press identity. So these are a few questions that I want you to just consider initially. I have some other ones that I want you to consider as well, because I think with this, you need to give yourself space to think about what elements of your personality you want to actually bring forward and let the press know about. So these are just a couple of things I want you to think about initially. So, you know, what do you want to achieve by doing this? By sharing, you know, elements of your own personal story, how you got into business, why you did it, those type of things, and also other things I'll share in a couple of minutes. And also I want to say at this juncture that it doesn't always have to be business related. You can share a personal story about something that you did that's not business related, and it will still reveal a little bit about you. It doesn't always have to be connected to the business. So I also want you to ask yourself, well, what do you want to be known for? You know, if you go down this route, and it's a really, really great route to go down, and I have encouraged people to do this in their business, especially when they might be struggling to get PR. So you need to ask yourself initially, well, what do you want to be known for? What is your expertise? What stories can you share that will really highlight and accentuate your expertise? What do you want the reader to remember about you? And also think about the emotions that you want to conjure up when you share a personal story. I have examples further on in relation to this. And then say, you know, when you do open up some personal elements of your life and your background, you know, journalists are really keen to hear about this. And just before you consider going down this route, you know, ask yourself, are you willing to dive deeper into this area? Because the journalist may want to. And this, I suppose, is, you know, where you think about, you know, how much is too much, you know, how much do I want to share of me? But the one thing you need to do is remain consistent. And this relates, you know, across the board in your PR, to be honest. But if you're going down the personal stories route, you're going to start becoming known for certain things when you start to share your story. So just be ready to be consistent and to share, you know, not too much, but I'm going to show you, you know, maybe 1 to 2 stories, personal stories in the year, but to use them strategically. But as I say, we first need to figure out a couple of more things first. So, okay. Sound seems to be echoing. I think it's okay my side, Emma. I'm not sure if you want to maybe log off and log on again. Maybe that might work. I know sometimes for me, when I'm uploading things onto this platform, it can go a little bit funny. Okay, all of us saying it's okay here. Okay, that's so you first need to figure out a few things of this, remember. So if you are having problems with the sound, just let me know. I can help fill in any gaps if you want to email me afterwards or whatever. So I watched a really interesting Netflix documentary about Bill Gates last year, and he does a really interesting thing called a Think Week. It's actually a really good documentary to watch if you're interested. Not sure if it's still up on Netflix. I actually think it is, but he does what he calls a Think Week, and he did this throughout his time in Microsoft. He would take a week away, no social media, no contact with anyone, and he would bring a couple of books with him to read, to bring himself up to speed on various issues in when he used to work in Microsoft and now with the foundation. And he felt that this was a really, really good way to just clear out the noise and focus on what he needed to focus to grow the business. And he would often come up with stories and with angles to stories and to products and services that came about from just taking a moment to not be distracted by so many things. Now, I know taking a Think Week for some of us is not possible, but you could maybe take a Think Day or a Think Half Day or a Think Hour, and to just go somewhere, it could be still your office, but I encourage you to actually leave your regular place of work and go somewhere to just really give yourself the headspace to think about what personal stories you want to share. And anyone that I work with in relation to this, I actually ask them to do this quarterly, because it helps you to just really take a moment to think about, well, the why you are doing PR, because PR and doing your own PR can be really time consuming, and you want to have a strategy. And if you're sharing personal stories, you want to get the best ones. You don't want to pick the first one that comes into your head. You want to make sure that you're sharing stories that are showing a little bit of you, but are also furthering your business story as well and making you relatable. So remember, this is just the start, but this is a really good thing to do, even if you're for other areas of your business too. But certainly when you're starting to go down this route, which is quite a different route in PR and a really worthwhile one, taking a little bit of time to think about your why and to think about your personal stories away from the noise is a really good idea. Okay, I'm just going to pop back in to make sure Emma is okay. Oh, great. That's great, Emma. That's great to know. That's great. Okay, that's brilliant. You can hear it. That's fantastic. Okay, so my first piece of advice is to actually step back from your product and service and ask yourself just a couple of questions. These are the questions I get people to answer initially. I have a lot more when we dive further into this, but these are ones that, to try and get you inspired about angles, about stories, and to really get you thinking about what stories you want to share. So I'm just going to go through some of them here. You can see them on the slide. So did you set up your business because it came about from a personal experience you had? This could be something to do with your health. It could be something to do with a previous job you were in. And you decided that you saw something in this personal experience, and that's what pushed you into starting your business. Were you unemployed at the time and you just decided to bite the bullet and go and do something that you had always wanted to do? Did you hate your job and you decided, okay, I need to do something about this? And that's what spurred you on to start. Some people have found inspiration, and there's one person I worked with and she found inspiration from reading an article in a newspaper. And if you haven't been to any of my other classes, reading newspapers you want to get featured in and magazines are a huge part of how I get people to start with their own publicity. I don't encourage you to pitch to a newspaper if you haven't opened it in the last month. So some people have come up with an idea for a product or a service or an add-on to their service by reading an article in a newspaper. And if this has happened to you, or if you see this in the future, try and go back and find that article or keep that article, because that's a really, really fantastic way to really bolster your pitch to the media. If you can show them, well, this is the article that I read and it really inspired me to do something. Okay, so where were you when it happened? Were you on holiday? Were you at home? Were you at your parents' house? Did your dad say something to you? Did your mother say something? Were you talking to a friend at some point and they had always wanted to start a business, but they just felt that they didn't have the resources to do it, they didn't have the confidence, but then you decided that you wanted to go down this route. And there's lots of different ways of trying to get started with your personal story. But what I encourage you to do is just go back to the very start of why you're in business now and figure out, what was that initial spark? And start from there, because that's a really good place to start. And I want you, when you have answers to these questions and whatever, question relates to you and speaks to you the most, I want you to group them into different types. And why I want you to do this is because it helps you to become more clear in how you present your personal story to a journalist. So these are 4 types of personal stories that I generally look at them in these 4 groups. So there's the transformational. Did you totally transform your business after, say, seeing an article or after talking to somebody or seeing a trend in the business, in your business area? A fast growth story. These are really, really good stories that journalists absolutely love, because you will be sharing with them, how you managed to grow from having, from 2,000 a month to 10,000 a month, and what you did to do that, and how others can do it as well. A turnaround story. Let's say if you had started a business and it failed, and then you decided that you were going to go again, but with a different idea, and how you learned from one experience and used that as a turnaround story. Or it could be a discovery type story where you discovered something that you felt was missing in the market, and you decided to go and research it and set up a service or a product in relation to that. So when you have the answers to the questions in the previous slide, by grouping them into different boxes, it helps you to think about how you're going to pitch the story. Because if you can, pitch it not just as a broad sweeping personal story, but if you're thinking about it, say, with a fast growth mentality in your brain, and that's how you're going to pitch the story, then the journalist will see that you're kind of thinking not just about, sharing a story, but you're thinking about how it helped you and how it also helps the readers and their audience that they're going to be sharing the article with. Okay. Any questions so far or anything? Is that making sense? Okay. I have often found that when people go to share personal stories first and they're trying to build their personal brand, they just kind of share what comes to mind first, and they don't really have a strategy around it. So why I like to group them into different boxes is because you can say a discovery story, for example, might be a very good story to share at the start of the year, whereas a fast growth story might be a better one to share at the end of the year as more of a wrap up of your year and how successful your year was. And just to try and think about them in relation to how you're going to angle it for a journalist. That's how I like to think about them, rather than just a broad sweeping personal story. So one of the best ways to look at personal stories and to learn about how to pitch a personal story is by looking at popular magazines like Closer, Take a Break. I have some mentioned here, Reader's Digest, Elle, InStyle, because you will find that the personal stories shared here. Now, you don't have to go down the same route as some of them. Some of them are very dramatic. But if you go and read them, it gives you a sense of, how journalists like to write personal stories. And you will start to see trends in how they're written and how journalists absolutely love the personal angle. So these are a few that I picked out in magazines over the last, I suppose, maybe 3 to 4 months or so, I'm guessing. So the first one really caught my eye because this was a woman who started a business, and it wasn't actually a weight loss business. It was to do with a childcare service. But the headline on the piece was "How a Peppa Pig Fun Fair Inspired Me to Lose Weight and Start My Business." And you'll notice how the journalist is writing it from is not writing it in the third person. He or she is writing it from the point of view of the person involved in the story, which actually makes it easier for the reader to engage with. So I would call that more of like a discovery story. So I'd be putting it into that bracket and writing it and with that hat on. So the second one here then was another really good one that caught my eye. My holiday nightmare with my in-laws and what I learned about myself. Now, this one is really, you're really going all out with this. And I don't, I'm not, it's up to you what stories you want to share, of course. But this one really caught my eye, and it went on to detail, she was a relationship coach, and there was a really interesting top tips, for when you go on holidays with your in-laws. It was a really, really great piece. And it was a transformational piece. Well, I think it is. So the third one here was another really eye-grabbing one. My husband told me on our honeymoon that we would need a lawyer when we got home. I mean, oh my God. So that's going to draw you in for sure. 5 business mistakes I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. That's quite interesting, but you will see, having a little bit more of the detail about the story itself and the headline really, really does draw you in a little bit more. So I've 2 more examples here. How personalizing the tagline in my emails led to a 30% click-through rate. So that's a fast growth story. And I always say, when you're sharing your personal story, always make sure your first paragraph is still in the personal zone. It doesn't, that you don't go off into business speak, because that's really off-putting. A journalist will change it, but it kind of takes the good out of a really great start if you're going to have a lot of business speak in the story. This is a personal story, remember. It's not a business pitch in the direct sense. And then the last one here is, here's why I think filler injections saved my marriage and made me a more confident leader. So these are ones that I wanted to share with you, just to start getting you to think more about, angles and interesting angles, and trying to get you to think in relation to your story, and, and trying to bracket it into these, I call them boxes, into these type of boxes, so you can pitch a personal story to a journalist. Let me just go back in here. Do we have any problems with sound or anything? No, that's brilliant. Okay. So yeah, I really encourage you to go and buy one of these magazines, and just to buy one every now and then. And always remember what actually drew you to the magazine, because that is a really good test to see, was it the personal story on the front cover, and what other things inside drew you in. Because oftentimes what draws you in is what draws other people in. And it's kind of having that knowledge and having that skill to hone in on that element of your story. And that's what makes journalists really, really love personal stories, because they know that readers are going to connect with them a lot faster. Okay, so I did mention earlier that you can go down the personal story route and just come up with a couple of stories and share them throughout the year. But I always say have a plan, because if you are going to take time to share a little bit of a personal story, you want to make the most of it. You want to maximize this to its limits. So I always say, if you're planning to build a personal brand based on personal stories that you're going to pitch to journalists, then plan out a strategy and plan it out under those 4 group headings that I've shared with you already. And, 1 to 2 a year is loads, because first of all, you don't want to be, you don't want to share too much too quickly, and you want to start building your personal brand, slowly but surely. And journalists are not going to be interested in getting a personal story from you every month, because, that's just overkill. So what I say is plan 1 to 2 strong personal stories in an entire 12 months, and make them relevant to something in your business, something that's happening in your local area, an event you're offering, or an event that maybe you're an affiliate with if you want to do that. And sometimes if you feel your story is really, really strong, and you will know this once you start to see what's making coverage in the magazines that I shared with you earlier, and what are making journalists tick. If you're following them on Twitter, please get on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, I've spoken about this in previous classes, that Twitter is where journalists are the most active, and that's where you need to be to connect with them. Anyway, to get back to my slide, I can go on about Twitter for a long time. If you feel that you have a really strong personal story and you're willing to share it, and you're happy with everything that you want to share, and that's something that I always ask people, to make sure you're happy with everything that you are sharing with the journalist, because they will change it and they will swap it around. And I don't want you to experience something that, oh, well, I thought that the journalist wouldn't read that in the story or in the pitch, and now it's part of the headline. And sometimes people can be really surprised what angle a journalist takes. So always be happy with everything that you're sending in your email. But if you have a really strong personal story, I would suggest that you offer it as an exclusive to one outlet to start with, and build a relationship with that journalist, and see if they are going to take your personal story and write it. Because if you have a really strong one, the worst thing you can do is start blasting it to like 10 or 20 journalists. What I would prefer you do is pitch it to one journalist and see when wait, and then have a second one in your back pocket to pitch to the following week, and try and build relationships with a few key journalists as opposed to blasting it everywhere. And if you have an exclusive, stand over it. If it's a strong story and you really feel, that it's worthy of an exclusive, there's never any harm in pitching it to a journalist. And you may have backed up your story with research, with you could back it up with some quotes from someone else in your business. But if it's a personal story, I want it to be about you, obviously. So as a starting point, set out your stories and your overall themes, and theme them into the boxes that I shared earlier, and always maximize them, because people love a personal story, and a good turnaround story, a good discovery story, transformational, fast growth. They absolutely love them. If you go onto the Daily Mail on any day of the week, you will find a lot of these kind of stories there. And the person sharing the story will have connected it to their business. So maximize them, and have, like a pre, during, and post plan to really promote the story. And I always encourage you to promote stories that journalists do, and to thank them, because so many people forget to thank them, and they're moving along to the next publication that they want to get published in. Always remember that building relationships is really, really important. And I suppose in the last year and a half, the world has changed in a crazy way. So as things are changing all around us, if you are standing strong in your personal brand and in your personal story, it will really stand to you in the long term. And journalists will get to recognize you for this. And it's one of the fastest ways to get visibility, because journalists absolutely love a good personal story. Okay. Now, there is thinking that, personal branding and PR should be separate, and that, your personal brand is something that is really precious, and it shouldn't be tampered with, and it should be to do more with, like emotions. And for me, the two are inextricably linked, and one benefits the other and vice versa. So for me, the two should be linked. And if within, I'm not sure if any of you are working within larger organizations, but sometimes the marketing and the PR sections don't hook up very well. And I have experience of this from working in multinationals. But they really should be intertwined, and one should be helping the other. And I have some reasons here why, that when the two work together, and when you pitch a journalist a personal story, there are many reasons why you will be able to get coverage. Because first of all, it's going to take all the sales talk out of the story. And journalists do not like a lot of sales talk. They'll delete that instantly out of the story, because it's going to bore the reader. So a personal story, or even a very, small element of a personal story within a larger pitch, it ignites the story. It brings it to life straight away. You're also going to unveil a side of you that, people might not already know. And sometimes if you have already got publicity and you feel like you're just sending press releases upon press releases and pitch emails all the time, you might feel that it's time now to share a little bit more of your personal story. And by sharing a personal story, it's actually easier to bridge the gap between, who you are as a person and who you are as a business person. And as I've said, journalists absolutely love them. They will write personal stories with personal angles all day long, because they know readers absolutely love them. And try to use something personal in your subject line when you are sending it into a journalist, just to mark out the different angle that's in your story. This is not another press release. This is a personal story that you're sharing with them, and you need to make sure that they're aware of that. And now, I never recommend using press release in a subject line, because the subject line is, it's a coveted spot. So what you should do is, whatever headline you have on your personal story, to use that in your subject line. And the journalist will know straight away that this is something a little different. This is not the usual that I get 50 to 60, 70 times a day. But there is one tip that I really, really want you to follow. And this comes from someone who has been in newsrooms for many, many years, that don't use the term personal branding in the body of the email to the journalist. Don't say, I'm sharing a personal story to boost my personal brand, and I'm hoping that it's going to be of interest to you. Because journalists don't like that kind of language. Just give them the story. Tell a little bit of the story in the body of the email. And that's what will get their attention a lot faster. Like if they see, I'm sharing a personal branding story, they'll be like, oh, what is this? Like, they might hit delete instantly, or they might read on, but just don't use it. There's no need to use it, because they know that they're used to getting these, that they know that you are sharing a personal story, because first of all, you want to, and that it's a very good way to get in front of audiences, and it's going to build your visibility in a pretty major way. Okay, I'm going to do another training on guest posting another time, but I kind of felt like I needed to mention it here, because guest posting is a brilliant way to actually get started in sharing your personal story. However, what I encourage you to do is to look at places like Thrive Global, where you can actually, submit your own personal story or onto the platform. as a way of getting started. Because for me, always, if you can share a personal story with a media outlet, it will get more traction for you. I'm not saying Thrive Global won't get you traction, but if you're going down the PR route, to try and test a story first as a guest post and see, test your writing, test your way of coming up with the story. And then use that bit of knowledge and a little bit of practice to go and pitch to journalists. But this is also a really, really fantastic way to build visibility. And I just wanted to mention it here because if you're finding it difficult to get started with sharing your personal story and to putting a few personal stories out there, there are places where you can pitch to and to see, what response you get and, to start conversations with journalists. So there are ones here that I would recommend you look at if you've got time. Lifehacker, Baby Center, Mind Body Green's an excellent one. Nutrition Rocks, Bustle, Elite Daily. Now there are loads of others, but what I encourage you to do is to maybe start writing your own ones first, or outlines, and don't give away all your good stuff initially. But if you've got a plan and you know which outlets you want to really, really target, save your best stuff for them. But it's certainly a fantastic way to grow your email list, to grow your audience, and certainly look at those initially and go from there. And that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions. So if you want to pop them in the chat box. But while I'm waiting for the questions to come in, I have finally, if any of you have been on my training before, you will know that I'm in the middle of finishing a nonfiction book about media publicity, and it is available for pre-order right now on Amazon, but the pre-order is only available on Kindle. So it's called Breaking into the Media, A Journalist's Guide, and I'm absolutely thrilled that I'm finally at the end with this manuscript, because it's taken me a few years to do it, and I had a baby in the middle, so it had to be put on hold. But now it's almost ready to go. And at the moment, I am planning a launch party, and it's going to have interviews with 2 national journalists, and we're going to talk about how to get media publicity and what you need to do to get their attention. So I encourage you to go and check it out. And as I say, it's just available on pre-order at the moment, but it will be available. I'm looking at April time. So I'm absolutely thrilled, because if any of you on here have written a book, then you will know how difficult it is to get it over the line and how hard it is to let go of the book and just put it out there. So has anyone got any questions or anything that they want to ask me? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now. Stop sharing. Yeah, so for people who are starting, doing personal stories, I always encourage you to just take a little bit of a time out first and really, really, hone in on why you want to go down this route. This is a fascinating route. And if you even pick up a magazine, even off the shelves, you don't even have to buy what angles they take in the personal story. And you'll always find that these personal stories always have a link back to the person who is the main subject of it. And that can be you. And certainly ones that I read often in the likes of Elle and Closer, I'm always fascinated, because I'm always interested to know the personal story behind. I work with a client initially, I always ask them, okay, I need to know a little bit about you. And why I ask these questions is because when I get to know somebody better, I can find angles from their personal story to use to get them coverage for their business. And it's so important to have a strong personal brand now, especially with the way things have changed so much in the last year. People are definitely now more inclined to relate to people as opposed to, and if you've got a strong personal brand that you are willing to spend time on, we would really, people really relate to it. And if you go and even take a quick look in the Daily Mail, like there are ones there, and they're really fascinating. And I find that people, they always have, some of them have a before and after shot. Now that's a very standard way of doing it, and some outlets still do it that way, and they still get a lot of reaction and a lot of traction for businesses. But for me, always, it's the story of, I went from this to this, or I discovered this, and this is what I did to twist it around to help me or to help my customers. And also remember to, personal branding or personality marketing can include stories from your customers. But I always encourage anyone that I work with to start with themselves, because you're the face of the company. You're the person who started this. You're the one who took on all the heartache, all the pain. And there is bound to be really good stories in there that journalists will absolutely be delighted to get. So we have a couple of things. Okay, hang on here. So I hope that was useful. Okay, Darren. Very good talk. Thank you. Thank you, Darren. Okay, I aim to be increasingly into audience creation. Great. Not just finding one from people's past. Any tips on doing things deliberately to create a story to pitch? Yeah, the Beatles playing on top of a building, and U2 did that as well in the States. Yeah, you can go down that route. I often find that increasingly into audience creation, not just finding one. So you mean not just finding one from people's past. Audience creation. Yeah, I suppose it is. It's like it's something that I suppose I could talk about in another talk about, like, say, using an event or a photograph or a video clip to try and generate new audiences. But for me, when you're starting with personal branding, it's always really important to look backwards before you look forward, because oftentimes when you look back, you can find things that you wouldn't do again looking forward. For me, personal branding has to be, I suppose, rooted in the personal story of the person involved, and then grow from there, if that makes sense. Yeah, the Beatles thing, yeah, that's, I mean, I've instantly got that image in my head. Story creation, sorry, I'm just reading it now. This is very, it's a little bit slow on this side. Yeah, for me, story creation, it always starts with someone's backstory. And then what I do with that is I try and link it into stories of now, or use them as standalone stories or exclusives. But what I always try to do is think of angles when I go to interview someone initially, and I ask them some of the questions that I've shown you earlier, that I'm always looking for the strong angles in their backstory to use for future. Okay, Emma is saying, we have a client who doesn't have that strong of a presence. They're a small independent business family. That's interesting, run by mother and daughters. Okay, love that. What angle would you recommend in terms of creating a story around International Women's Day? Interesting. In terms of PR, do we have to start planning angles now for things, changes due to the lift in restrictions? And yes, certainly. Stories, a lot of people you will find have shared stories, about their lockdown experience. So I think when we start easing out of lockdown, there will be room for people to share stories about how they grew a business, or started a business on a shoestring budget, or started a business with 5 kids under 10 at home all the time, those type of things. But I think by the time lockdown ends, people will be really tired of talking about COVID. I mean, I am tired of it now, and I'm dying for it to be over. And I know journalists are tired of it as well. You have to remember that journalists are covering this story now for over a year, almost a year now. And they have seen all the angles under the sun at this stage. So if you are pitching something in relation to COVID, I would try and pitch it maybe, as you said here, when the restrictions have finished, what's your business most looking forward to doing for its customers once it can see its customers again face to face. Those type of stories would be more interesting, I think. Or, say you have a long-standing customer that you've not seen for a year face to face, and now they're back to work with you, and you're having your first meeting or your first coffee. That's a really nice story, and I would encourage people to kind of look at stories in relation to, their customers when things start to come back to normal, because we're all going to be dying to see friends and family and people that we work with in our business again face to face for a coffee. That is for sure. So in terms of International Women's Day, first of all, I would say you would need to be pitching pretty soon, because it's in 2 weeks, I think. So you would still be okay to pitch to a local outlet for now. Nationals, it's hard to know, but I would still maybe send them something. Well, I would look at, how certainly an image of the mother and daughters in an interest. I don't know what kind of business it is. That would really help, Emma, if I knew what industry it is. Like any angles in relation to, the mother and daughter relationship and the dynamics of that within a business. If there were, it's retail, okay, cool. If the mother and daughters, or if the mother and daughters were, how they plan to pass the business on again, like are they going to pass, let's say the daughters, are they going to pass it on to, do they want it to remain a female run business? How do they feel that has impacted their way of doing things? Have they overcome obstacles because of it being a female-run business? There are lots of really amazing angles that I think you could come up with there. If I had a bit of backstory, like, are some of the daughters, are they all just mainly involved in this, or what parts of the business do the daughters do? Is there one of them that's really creative? I suppose I'd need to get to know a little bit more about them, and then you could certainly have some angles, because International Women's Day, like, say if they were, sorry now because I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if they were one of, a small number of businesses that are female-led in your area. Let's say if you do a very, very quick scan of the businesses in your part of town, and you realize that they are, the only one standing, then that's kind of an interesting angle, because, so many businesses have collapsed now since COVID. And here we have, mother and daughter still going strong. Okay, so they are super creative and involved in the buying team. Okay, cool. I don't know if you are aware of, I'll send you the link actually, of a tooth whitening company. Was actually began in Galway, where I'm from, and they are now, they've sold it, and they're multi-millionaires now at this point. But their story is really interesting, and it's 2 sisters that were involved in the business and how they grew it. And if I think of the link, Emma, I will send it to you, because their brand story would actually be really interesting to you. What they started off very, very small, and they the reason I know them is because I was working as a journalist when they were pitching stories to me about their business, and it was a really small business at the time, small, tiny retail outlet. But there were two sisters, and we loved that angle. And the two sisters were actually quite alike, almost like twins, you know. So there was a lot of, you know, like who's who or whatever. And they also did a story with their partners. And it's funny, like their partners were even a little bit alike. It's just very strange. But they weren't brothers or related or anything. But their story was really interesting because they started small. They built very good local relationships with the media. And then they did some TV stuff. And how they pitched TV stuff was, you know, the before and after of this teeth whitening I think it was a paste, but it's also strips. They have a wide variety of products now. But if I think of it, and it still hasn't come to me, and I'm so sorry, but I will share a link to their business because their story is really amazing, and I think it might spark some inspiration for you. So I don't think we've any more questions. I'm just going to scan up again. Feel free to respond back to me in an email if you have any further questions. I'm also available for PR power hours is what I call them. If you want to come and chat to me for an hour in relation to any problem you want to sort in your business, or if you need me to look at a press release or a pitch email you've been sending out, shoot me an email and I'm happy to arrange a PR power hour, is what I call it. And you will have my undivided attention for an hour. And what I like to do, if you are interested in booking in one of these with me, is we have a bit of a chat over email initially, so I know exactly what you want to do, and then we arrange the call. It's not arrange the call and then chat about what we want to do in the hour on the call. No. I like to maybe have a bit of a chat beforehand, then arrange it, and then when we actually are together for an hour, that we are doing actual business. That you've joined me this morning, and I hope it's a nice day where you are. Go have a cup of tea and have a really, really good day. Thank you again. Bye-bye.